with this. Well, the World Boxing Super Series confirmed via their Instagram account that the fight between 140-pound WBA champion Regis Prograis against Josh Taylor, the IBF 140-pound champion, that their fight does in fact qualify for the coveted Ring Magazine belt. And when it comes to the Ring Magazine belt, the Ring Magazine title, this is a much harder title to come by than any of the alphabet titles, because this title, unlike those titles, requires you to face a division by division, not just a guy via the alphabet ranks, but a division by division top 5 opponent every 18 months. This is a big part of the reason that both Tyson Fury, Adonis Stevenson, and Guillermo Rigondeaux were stripped of their Ring Magazine world titles, because, that those guys hadn't fought a top 5 guy in their weight class very long, in a very long time upon procuring that title. And in case you're not familiar with the Ring Magazine belt, what it attempts to do and what it attempts to be is a physical representation of whoever the lineal champion in a weight class is. Don't be confused by this. You can still be the lineal champion of a weight class even if you're not in possession of the Ring Magazine title. But the title itself does attempt to be synonymous with whoever the lineal champion is. One example is Tyson Fury. He is still considered by many to be the lineal heavyweight champion, even today, but he's not in possession of the Ring Magazine title. Not today. He was stripped of it months ago, because he wasn't fighting anybody, he wasn't doing anything. He was all but retired, so, he was stripped of it. But upon returning, he is considered by many as the lineal heavyweight champion, even though he doesn't have that title in his possession
anymore.
Now, in the case of Regis Rougarou Prograis and Josh the Tartan Tornado Taylor, well, their fight qualifies not only as a fight for what is the Ring Magazine title, but for the lineal 140-pound championship. The lineage will be passed over to the winner of that fight, it being that both Josh Taylor and Regis Prograis are the consensus number 1 and number 2 of the 140-pound division. When Terrence Crawford moved up, the lineage pretty much went with him, It went up there to the 147-pound division, so that hits the reset button on the 140-pound division. Because, Crawford's not campaigning at 140 anymore. He's at 147. So how can any contender, any champion, achieve lineal status if the lineal champion, what was the lineal champion, moved up in weight? It's very simple. Number 1 and number 2 have to fight each other. Not number 1 and number 2 via the WBC or the WBA or the WBO or the IBF, but the number 1 and number 2 of the division. And that's what Josh Taylor and Regis Prograis are. They are the consensus number 1 and number 2 at 140 pounds. So their fight qualifies not only for the Ring Magazine title, but for the lineal championship. The lineage will be extended to the winner of that fight. And it's only right that the winner of this fight get the Ring Magazine title, because these guys, they had to face some stiff competition to get to this point. They had to face some stiff competition. Regis Prograis had to square off against the WBA champion, Kirill Rillick. Josh Taylor, he had to square off against the IBF champion, Ivan Bedenchik. This tourney is bringing out the best and brightest in the 140-pound division, and the best out of them individually. It's going to be a hell of a matchup. I still don't know who to go with to win that fight. It's very early, but whoever it is, whoever it turns out to be, whether it's Regis or Josh, whoever it is, they're almost guaranteed. They're a shoo-in to emerge somewhere on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. It being that, the winner of the fight is going to be a unified champion, and there are already some unified champions ranked on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. But this unified champion, unlike those unified champions, won't just be a unified champion. They will be the lineal and Ring Magazine champion in possession of the Muhammad Ali Trophy, having participated in the World Boxing Super Series. So whoever the winner is, they will emerge ahead of some others. These designations, they commemorate the magnitude of the accomplishment that whoever the winner of the fighter is, they're a champion. And there are lots of champions in the sport of boxing, but there aren't that many unified champions. And for all those unified champions that are out there, however many there are, while there are some out there, not all of those unified champions are lineal champions, and not all of those unified champions are Ring Magazine champions. these particular designations put them slightly ahead. Put the winner of this fight, will put the winner of this fight slightly ahead of some others, because while some others are unified champions, they don't have all those designations, but the winner of this fight will. And rest assured that these designations are important because they're not easy to come by. It is not as easy to win a Ring Magazine title as it is to procure a world title. A Ring Magazine title, you got to face some stiff you got to face some stiff competition to get your hands on that one. And that's why that year mark is
an indicator,
a reflection of that fighter's skill and who that fighter is to his or her weight class. You understand? That there's lots of champions, there's unified champions, but not everybody gets to say they're a Ring Magazine champion. That's a very special designation. I mean, look at 147. You got 4 fucking world champions up there. Not a single one of them has the Ring Magazine title. Only Terrence Crawford can say that he's ever actually touched the Ring Magazine title and was, and achieved lineal status, just not at 147.
Not yet.
He did it at 135. He did it at 140. But now at 147, you see how the division breaks down. Keith Thurman used to be a unified champion. He was never a Ring Magazine champion. Errol, he's a champion, but he's never been unified, never been Ring, never been lineal. You got 4 world champions in that weight class. It's a hot weight class with a lot of talent, but at the end of the day, this is what I'm talking about. That for all those good fighters that are up there, none of them,
not yet anyways,
have yet achieved that in that weight class. Terrence Crawford did it. He just didn't do it at 147. Not yet. And that's how hard those designations are to come by. Stand Ring Magazine champion, special. It's a special commemoration. So, I'm very happy to hear that news. It makes sense. It's only right that the winner of this fight get that designation, gain that world title, and I'm happy to hear it. It only adds to the prestige of the matchup itself, because these two guys, they're two very talented guys, 2 young, strong champions in their prime, making statements fight by fight. So the Ring Magazine title being on the line, along with the lineal status and the Muhammad Ali trophy, it only adds to the prestige. I'm very much looking forward to that fight. Now, just in keeping with the theme of unifications, the 140-pound division, and how those things affect the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, when it comes to the women's Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, there may be some movement tomorrow night. You see, WBC 140-pound champion Jessica McCaskill is going to be squaring off against the WBA's champion, Benavidez Sanchez, in what is a unification fight. And the recent activity of Jessica McCaskill, if she is successful tomorrow night, which I think she will be, I think she's going to starch Benavidez Sanchez. Jessica McCaskill being a pressure fighter, well, that kind of a style tends to turn Benavidez Sanchez into a deer in the headlights. I'll leave the breakdown to that fight in the description box. But I do think that Jessica is going to unify those titles. And if and when she does, she will move ahead of Delphine Persoon on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. Now, anybody familiar with Delphine knows that she is one of the most accomplished, active woman boxers in the entire sport. She's been WBC champion for a long time.
Fucked up a lot of people.
But the precedents set forth for Jessica to move ahead of Delphine is recent activity.
Oh, so?
You see, in Jessica's last fight, she moved up in weight from 135 to 140 to take on what was the consensus number 1 at 140 pounds, Erika Farias. She took her on and beat her in dominating fashion. Now, I'm fully aware that Erika Farias was beaten once already by Delphine Persoon years ago in 2014. So, I'm not overlooking that.
It matters.
But what inches Jessica ahead of Delphine in this case is recent activity in the form of unifying world titles. That if Jessica McCaskill is successful tomorrow night, she will inch along and ahead of Delphine, it being that while Delphine is very accomplished, taken on many great fighters, had a long successful reign as a world champion, today, which is what the list is all about, who the best fighters in the sport are today. Here today, Delphine is not in possession of 2 or 3 or 4 world titles, whereas Jessica, if she is successful, she will be in possession of 2 world titles, the WBA and the WBC. Based on that recent activity, the fact that Jessica climbed up in weight and beat Erika Farias in dominant fashion, and that she went from that to unifying world titles with another world champion. That's what gives the precedence for Jessica to move ahead of Delphine, even though Delphine has an overall more robust body of work. But if we cross-compare both fighters' recent activity, the fighters that they've been keeping busy with as of late, Jessica's recent activity and her opponents, the quality of that competition is slightly better than some of the girls that Delphine's been fighting. That they may have a common opponent in Erika Farias, but the difference in Jessica's case is she's going from fighting one champion to fighting another champion. Whereas Delphine, for all her accomplishments here today, she's really not a unified champion. So that inches Jessica along. But I will say, in the event, however likely or unlikely you think it is, in the event that Delphine is to defeat Katie Taylor in what is their unification fight for the undisputed lightweight championship. If Delphine, by some chance, emerges the victor, she'll shoot right past Jessica McCaskill and a lot of other girls if she is successful. So, if you're taking any issue with Jessica moving ahead of Delphine, you have that to rest upon. Now, the fight between Jessica and Anai is going to be going down tomorrow night on the undercard for the Haney versus Moran fight, which has since been relocated back to the MGM Grand at National Harbor in Maryland. Bit of confusion there because, one story said it was going to Vegas and then another story said it was going to the MGM. Either way, you can watch the fight from your house on DAZN. So, just keep your eyes peeled for this. Jessica McCaskill versus Anais Sanchez, WBC, WBA 140-pound unification fight. And what I think is going to be a win for Jessica McCaskill. In other news, former WBC super middleweight champion David Benavidez has begun training for the mandated title fight between himself and Anthony Durrell. He's going to start training up there over in Canastota at the International Boxing Hall of Fame for what is a mandated fight between himself and the current WBC super middleweight champion, Anthony Durrell. And this is a big part of the reason why I said that I don't think Anthony Durrell's going to have a very long reign, because as soon as he's got to defend that title against David, it's conceivable, it's probable, highly probable, that David's going to get his belt back. And thinking ahead to if and when David does get his belt back, the only fight that makes sense for David at that point in the juncture would be a Caleb Plant fight. Both of those guys, I think Caleb is going to beat Mike Lee. Let me just put that out there. I think that Caleb will remain the IBF's super middleweight champion. And thereafter, just thinking ahead, the only fight that really makes sense for either of those two guys is a fight against each other. And it just so happens that they're on the same side of the street. So there shouldn't be any friction, any cross-promotional, any cross-network problems in making that fight.
There shouldn't be.
There shouldn't be. But it's the PBC, so, it's hit or miss. It's anybody's fucking guess. Because you know what? Gary Russell and Leo Santa Cruz, they're on the same side of the street, and they haven't fucking fought yet. So it's like, the friction shouldn't be there. But it might be, in some way, shape, or form, in some capacity, because it's the PBC. The PBC might not make that fight in a timely fashion, because there's a couple of fights they could have made that they haven't yet made in a timely fashion. I can only hope that,
they get it done.
They deliver on that, because that outfit, unlike the other two outfits that have champions at that weight, they have a unique opportunity to deliver the fans a quality fight. Frank Warren, he's got Billy Joe Saunders, and Billy Joe Saunders just became a two-division champion this past weekend. But those things in mind, he doesn't have a lot of interesting opponents for Billy to fight, so they're confronted with a unique problem that they're going to have to work with somebody, and it's kind of difficult because Queensberry Promotions is in bed with Top Rank, who's in bed with ESPN. So there are cross-promotional and cross-network issues to be addressed. The same applies to Callum Smith. He's over there on Matchroom, the Eddie Hearn side of the street / DAZN side of the street. So it limits what those guys can do, because there are these rivalries and promotional network issues, all that stuff. Whereas in the case of Caleb Plant, in the case of David Benavidez, and in the case of Anthony Durrell, whatever, those guys were on the same side of the street. You ain't got the problems that they got. So you, unlike them, should be able to deliver a quality fight at that weight with little to no friction. I'm honestly hoping that the PBC doesn't live up to their reputation, because they have a reputation for delaying fights and stalling fights that don't need to be stalled. That the time for the fight is now. And the super middleweight division needs a superstar. And the only real way you're gonna get one is if you make these champions fight each other. They have two of them. Or they in many ways, they got two
So
of them.
no excuses.
That whether the title stays in the hands of Anthony Durrell or it changes hands back into the hands of David Benavidez, you still got two world champions on that side of the street, because you've got Caleb Plant. So you, unlike the other outfits, don't have any obstacles to have to overcome to deliver a quality fight. So what I'm hoping is that the PBC doesn't live up to their reputation for stalling fights unnecessarily, and they make the goddamn thing. Because that division needs a superstar. It's an open division. It's an open weight class. There's plenty of talent in it, but all that talent don't mean a goddamn fucking thing if you don't match them against each other. So we'll see what happens. David Benavidez is starting his path back to the green belt, and what I'm hoping is that it leads to a unification fight.